So, and I would like to give the floor right now to my dear colleague and the author of our Pumas paper and the creator of the term Pacific Pumas, Sam George. So Sam, the floor is yours right now for your presentation, and then I will introduce our panel, get into a debate on the panel, and then of course we will open the floor for Q&A, because I think all of you have many comments and questions that you want to address today. So Sam, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Annetta. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to speak on this panel. I thank the panel. I also thank everybody for joining us on what's a very cold March day. It's especially exciting for me to be here today in support of what is a fundamentally optimistic study, a study that highlights the positive trends in Latin America. It highlights the momentum of Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, what the Bertelsmann Foundation is calling the Pacific Pumas. The puma, of course, a powerful, fast, agile animal, comfortable operating efficiently and out of the spotlight. We think it's a fitting mascot for the momentum and this moment of optimism. Because let's face it, since the global financial crisis, true areas of optimism have been few, fleeting, and far in between. Even just in terms of Latin America, it seems that the few times that the region permeates international news, it's almost always negative. No, we hear about disappointing growth in Brazil. We hear about macroeconomic deterioration in Argentina, or a general unraveling in Venezuela. And this is not to jump immediately to the notion of a Latin America divided between a stumbling Atlantic and a rapidly maturing Pacific. That's neither the point of this paper nor the point of this gathering today. But it is to address the sort of growing opinion that perhaps Latin America has once again missed its moment, that the opportunity created by the rise of China and strong commodity prices has passed the region by. This study suggests that that's not true. This study suggests that quietly, perhaps on the periphery at least of global attention, Colombia, Chile, Mexico, and Peru have taken significant strides towards stabilizing their macroeconomic foundation, towards fostering positive investment in business environments, towards improving, albeit still imperfect, governance, and to integrating into the global economic system, all while making major inroads against poverty. This is the story of the advancements of Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, the Pacific Pumas, and the opportunities that they now have moving forward. And I suspect many people are here today because of the Pacific Alliance. It's created quite a buzz in Washington, D.C., and I would say the world over. Certainly in the meetings I held regarding this project, the common refrain was it's the most exciting thing happening in Latin America. Eric mentioned the Moises Naim editorial calling it the most important alliance you've never heard of. I'm not sure that's true anymore. I think the word is out. But if there's one thing that I hope we can take from this conversation today, and one thing that we take from this study, it's that the momentum of these four countries is about more than an incipient integration pact, and that the Pacific Pumas concept is about more than just the Pacific Alliance. Why do I say that? Because on their own and individually, we believe these four countries have made advancements that far well beyond the scope of the Pacific Alliance. In particular, this paper highlights three aspects: the macroeconomic stability, the democratic maturity, and the efforts to integrate globally. And I just want to ever so briefly take a closer look at this, because this is important. Latin America has grown before, and then it hits a bust. It's these fundamental changes that we suggest maybe this time could be different. In terms of the macroeconomics, or as we call it, Pumanomics, what you're looking at here is perhaps a solid foundation that will allow you to sustain growth into the future. We're looking at inflation that has been low for years, that has essentially tracked developed economy inflation at least since 2006. Reserves that are almost double since 2009. Debt and deficit figures that are generally within the Maastricht bands, even while most of the EU is not. And I think this is important because we all realize that emerging markets are entering a period of turbulence as the United States tightens crisis-era macroeconomic policy. But it's due to this stability that we believe there will be turbulence, but that these 4 countries can emerge from it as stable and responsible contributors to the global economy. The second of the 3 was democratic maturity. And of course, it's not just economic distortions that can cause a financial system to collapse. Institutional distortions can have the same negative effect. And like hyperinflation, the inability to establish rules of the game has long been a hindrance for Latin America. And that's why it's so important that I feel in these 4 countries you're seeing the consolidation of the rules of the game, that you've seen successful transitions of power and party and executive respect for constitutional restraint. In Mexico, we've seen the willingness to address long-term bottlenecks, even at the expense of short-term growth. In Colombia, where the problem has never necessarily been the macroeconomic instability, but instead the violence, we're seeing important steps towards establishing a lasting peace. The third and final of the points is integration. And we can sit here all day and debate, is globalization a good thing or a bad thing? But the bottom line is it's not going to disappear. And for mid-sized emerging markets like Peru or Chile, where it's clear that there's not the internal growth motor to get where they want to be, it's imperative to find a niche in global trade. And even as the Doha round has sputtered, our Pacific Pumas, the Pacific Pumas, have used bilateral trade and block agreements to create linkages the world over. All 4 have deals with the United States. All 4 have deals with the European Union. All 4 have significant linkages with Pacific East Asia. And we should mention here, of course, that Mexico, Peru, and Chile are active participants in TPP negotiations. So then we come back and look at the Pacific Alliance. And the point here is that because these countries share the democratic improvements, because they share the macroeconomic stability, and because they share this openness to trade, they're natural partners. And via the Pacific Alliance, the Pumas have the opportunity to add gravitas to this individual momentum. Now, there's a number of stats in the paper, and I do hope you take a moment to read it, but the bottom line is together in the Pacific Alliance, the Pumas are big enough to be globally relevant to the United States that has long sought a large and stable partner in the region, globally relevant to the European Union seeking expanded trade and investment opportunities, relevant to the rest of the region, to smaller countries like Uruguay, Costa Rica, and Panama that are looking for a development model that makes more sense with their circumstances on the ground.
Yeah, you see it.
So then just sort of wrap up, and then we can pass it over to the ambassadors. I said in the beginning this is an optimistic text. It's not a naive text. And to be clear, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile are far from perfect. Violence, corruption, infrastructure deficit, urban, rural poverty remain a fact of life for millions, and this study does not shy away from that. But the fundamental argument here is that thanks to hard work and good timing, these 4 countries have a golden opportunity. They have embraced stability and integration at precisely the moment that the greater Pacific region has emerged as a focal point of global growth. What they do with that opportunity remains to be seen. Ultimately, I would argue that success shouldn't be judged in terms of any given year's growth rate, but rather in terms of the ability to create developed world institutions while maintaining emerging market dynamism. The ability to tackle difficult reforms, perhaps at the expense of short-term growth. As for being a regional leader, I would say it's not how many countries join the Pacific Alliance, but rather the depth and breadth of Pacific Alliance accords. In terms of global linkages, it's not how many FTAs you have on paper, but how many jobs you can turn them into. But all told, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile do not need to be perfect. They need to continue their momentum. And if they can take advantage of the opportunities that this momentum has presented them, they have a chance to set a new path for Latin American development. And if they accomplish this, then these Pacific Pumas of Latin America will finally have a chance to run with the Tigers of the East. Thank you for coming, and I hope you check out the paper. Annette?
Thank you so much, Sam.